The Texans OC search is still ongoing. The new names that have entered into it, we know they interviewed Nick Caley yesterday. Nick Caley, the passing game coordinator for Sean McVay in L.A. The two new names, one was a name that if you're a football fan, you're probably familiar with, Brian Johnson, especially because he's from here. Texans OC interview list. He's interviewing with the team reportedly today. He's in football circles, in NFL circles at least, probably, unfortunately for him, best known for getting fired after 1 year in Philadelphia in 2023. Philly goes to the Super Bowl with Shane Steichen as their OC in 2022. They elevate Brian Johnson, who'd been the quarterback's coach there the previous 2 years. We should point that out. It was an in-house promotion, so he was part of the success, too, as Jalen Hurts' position coach. He gets elevated to OC, and it just didn't work. It didn't work out. The Eagles bottomed out.
They were stuck in the mud offensively in the later parts of that season.
In
the playoffs.
Jalen Hurts looked like he wanted to be anywhere but in a Philadelphia Eagles uniform at times towards the end of the year. So Brian Johnson gets fired, and now the Eagles are back in the Super Bowl this year. The optics of that obviously don't really play very well for him. Well, that's why there are interviews.
You take an offense that was operating really well. You get a new offensive coordinator. The offense looks atrocious. You get another offensive coordinator, and the offense looks good again.
Yeah.
I guess that's just the sum total of it.
Yeah, and the offensive coordinator for this group is Kellen Moore, who's in line to get a head coaching job imminently, it would appear, with the Saints. So now Kellen did have Saquon Barkley, whereas Brian Johnson did not. But whatever.
That is an excellent point.
Yeah.
That I don't think we brought up.
We did not earlier.
In the beginning,
yeah. So they did make some changes to the actual personnel touching the football. But anyways,
I'll give up a Jason Kelsey if I can get a Saquon Barkley.
It's a good
who's
trade.
Still very much in his prime.
It's a good trade. Yeah. So Brian Johnson is getting to interview name that popped up, who's already interviewed. Like, this is like, oh yeah. And by the way, this guy interviewed yesterday, and I'd not heard of him before. I will admit. Grant, I don't go scouring the coaching staffs of NFC teams to see who their assistant OC and assistant QB coaches are. But Grant Udinsky, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, in case he gets hired, is he's the Minnesota assistant OC and assistant QB coach. He interviewed yesterday. Now, in doing some background checking on him, he's 28 years old. He got into coaching in 2019, so he's not even been – he was a graduate assistant for Matt Rule at Baylor in 2019, and then quickly got into the NFL. Like, he was on NFL staffs pretty quickly after that. So he's not been doing this very long, but the key quote that I saw about Grant Udinsky, 28-year-old wonderkind on the Minnesota Vikings staff, is that when he was interviewing for his job that he got when Kevin O'Connell hired him, Kevin O'Connell said he felt like he was talking to somebody who knew how to build a car that was interviewing for a job at a car wash.
Which is sometimes a bad hire, You don't want to hire a guy that's going to be unhappy in his job or his role because I'm thinking about the actual car wash scenario.
Sure.
But if he is indeed that smart and if he is like a Sean McVay type, that would be interesting. Now, Sean McVay got his first turn as a coordinator underneath Mike Shanahan, which is a whole different scenario than doing it, underneath the defensive-minded head coach. 28 years old it's really, really young coordinator.
Yeah.
You'd have to be damn smart. Although, for whatever it's worth, they interviewed him and not Josh McCown that we know of.
Yeah,
so, and Josh, who's working on that same staff in Minnesota.
He's the actual QB coach on that staff in Minnesota with Sam Darnold. Yeah, and to be fair, we don't know if they requested an interview with Josh McCown. Or if Josh McCown is taking do we know is McCown been interviewing for Josh? I'm not sure.
I don't think I've seen. Yeah.
Wait, where am I? Who is this guy?
Exactly.
The other quote I thought you were talking about, and this is the most exciting quote I've seen, is from motorcyclesports.net, which you and I earlier decided this was definitely written by artificial intelligence, but my God, it's never made me more interested in a candidate ever. Minnesota Vikings assistant quarterbacks coach Grant Udinsky continues to make waves in the NFL coaching landscape as he vies for the vacant offensive coordinator position with the Houston Texans. His recent interview with the Texans marks another crescendo in his symphony of interviews this offseason, showcasing his prowess and ambition in the football realm.
What's the word that you think gives it away that AI?
Vies.
Which one?
Vise.
Vise.
As he vies for the vacant offensive coordinator position for the. You can tell that there's a disconnect between the way things are and the way things you might write about it. So it was written by somebody and then AI juiced it up for him a little bit.
Yeah.
The crescendo and the symphony of interviews doesn't make any sense at all.
No.
That just doesn't.
Yeah.
That just doesn't. No, that analogy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Crescendo was one for me right there.
I was trying to figure out if it was a young writer trying way too hard over his AI.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's in motorcyclesports.net leads me to believe that this was definitely AI.
Yep. So do either of these candidates excite you? Grant Udinsky, Brian Johnson. How you feeling about those two?
Udinsky, I'm intrigued by just because he's getting an interview at the age of 28, and that if Kevin O'Connell thinks that highly of him, then that's very, very intriguing. Brian Johnson, he doesn't excite me as much as if he had never been an offensive coordinator at Philadelphia last year. That's the part that the Philadelphia last year offensively felt a lot like the Texans this year, in the second half of the season especially. I guess the other big question there, though, is, all right, how much was that because of Nick Sirianni and him meddling in the affairs, and was it his actual offense, and was Nick Sirianni holding him back?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It sounds like the Chip Kelly dream is over. Aaron Wilson did a video on YouTube yesterday that sort of bullet pointed a lot of the where the Texans are, according to what he's hearing, where the Texans are with a lot of these guys, and he was pretty clear that Chip Kelly, it sounds like, is going to be staying at Ohio State now. So that dream, which was initially you were the first one that I knew with that dream several weeks ago, Seth, for the offense, because you pointed out that Chip Kelly had been the one who had hired Jeff Stoutland as the offensive line coach in Philadelphia all the way back in 2013.
Yeah.
And Stout from your time, he was on the coaching staff when you were in college at Cornell. But Stoutland has been through multiple regimes now in Philadelphia, the offensive line. He's the best in the business.
Right, and I think, obviously, I don't expect that's not the only reason you hire a guy, but I think it illustrates a lot of what you know about Chip Kelly, which is that he's very good at engineering a run game, and he does it in a variety of different methods. And a lot of times people almost call him an offensive line coach as much as they call him an offensive coordinator. That was what was intriguing to me. The big question with Kelly would be that, look, with Ohio State, they were not up-tempo. They were not fast-paced at all. They were one of the slowest tempo teams in the league in the nation this year in college football. He was up-tempo at UCLA, not at the breakneck pace necessarily that he had been in comparison to other teams when he was in college at Oregon, but so he knows how to play slower, and he learned when he was in the NFL that he had to slow it down a little bit.
Yeah.
But I guess my big question would be, all right, all we really know of him as a coordinator in the NFL when things were really humming for his offense was that he was ambushing the league with that up-tempo stuff, and teams weren't ready for it. That was his magic bullet when he was doing well in the NFL. And everybody's kind of caught up to that. Offenses in general will mix up their tempos more. The league has seen it. He knows that he can't do it the way he was doing it the first couple years at Philadelphia without hurting his defense. So I don't know if he's genuinely proven a bona fide all-around offensive coordinator in the NFL, having to play without an extra advantage of just ambushing them with that up-tempo offense.
Yep. Text message. Let me understand. We have a Super Bowl defense. We fired our first-time Wonderkind OC, and we're interviewing new Wonderkind OCs with no experience. And we have a Super Bowl defense. Do I have that right? Now, you have that right. Now, I know where you're going with this, Texter, which is like, okay, we're interviewing this guy who profiles probably a lot like Bobby Slowick did a few years ago. There's many reasons to interview guys, and it's not always to hire them for the job that's open. You know, you do it to gather intel. You do it. You pointed this out earlier, Seth. You know, you do it to get them on your radar. You know, like there may not be. He's 28 years old, this Udinsky guy. There may not be an opening this time around, but if it goes well with whoever they hire here, there may be an opening a year or two from now at OC.
Listen, you know what else is really young and then sometimes ends up becoming something great? A sperm. and there's or spermazoa, and just but it's only one out of like 100 million,
right.
So you just sometimes you just got to keep throwing sperm at the problem, and eventually one of these young guys will turn into something.
A zygote, yeah.
We're willing to shoot as many sperm at the problem as it takes,
So
is spermazoa singular?
Spermatozoa sperm is short for spermatozoa.
So one little fella, one little guy
is a sleeve.
We always think
my
of the
confidence in the text page to correct us here is not very high, but yeah.
We always think of the one little sperm as a guy, which isn't the case. It's not. It's
part of an army. Yeah.
Well,
one survivor.
Well, and some of them carry an X and some of them carry a Y.
That's
so
true.
Like some of them are. It should be an army of little men and little women. They're going on to battle in war.
It's generated by a man, doesn't necessarily. Yeah, exactly.
Right. You got your Ys and you got your X's in there.
I love how your Zoom screen just gave the little thumbs up for this take right here. It happens a lot during the show, and we just ignore it. Like for this particular take that it popped up, that makes me laugh. That tickles me.
These guys are talking about sperma, the gender of sperm.
Sperm, or is Dr.
That would be if I ever do an animated feature film, which I plan on doing someday. I'm going to be sure that my little
they haven't done one yet,
my little
dude. The next that needs
co-ed men and women, one with an X, one with a Y.
Can you imagine that? That's the next Pixar movie. Is a little sperm swimming. We're out of ideas, man. We've done toys, we've done animals, we've done bugs, we've done everything. I got an idea. Jenkins, what's your idea? Sperm. Yes, let's do it.
There's between 20 million and 600 million in any little, what do you call it? What do you call a herd of sperm? Are they a murder of sperm?
I know what it's called in some circles. No. Can't say that on the air. The Texans OC.
I said gaggle.
Yeah.
Not.
No.
There's no R in there. I said a gaggle of sperm.
We'll talk during the break. So I think where this texter was going with this, definitely not there. But about the interviewing of Udinsky, like, okay, wow, that sounds really risky, for a team that I think a lot of people want, not necessarily just safe conservative, but like guys that feel a little less high variance than someone who's basically been an assistant OC and an assistant QB. Who's the safest out of all? There's 7 guys who have interviewed or will have interviewed by the end of today. Jared Johnson and Bill Lazor internally, and then the 5 external candidates are Jeff Nixon, Thad Lewis, Nick Caley, Grant Udinsky, and then Brian Johnson interviews today. Who's the safest out of all of those?
It feels like the safest. Really just by virtue of resume, experience, everything else that these guys have hired. If you're looking for safety, I think Bill Lazor is probably the safest in terms of having been an offensive coordinator before and now he hasn't had great offenses when he's been an offensive coordinator. That's the thing that makes that a less exciting name.
Yeah.
But I guess in terms of, it won't be an abject disaster, that would be the safest is Bill Lazor. The other part too is like them having seen him work with Gerard and with CJ. I wonder, both with Gerard and CJ, how much did they, or both with Gerard and Bill Lazor, I wonder how. All right, look, these guys have actually done good work with CJ, and we know what Bobby's issues were, and we don't think these guys are going to have those same issues. So maybe Gerard and Bill are the safest, and especially if you're keeping them together. But again, I don't know. I don't think that's going to be necessarily with a lot of people the popular choice, and I understand that.
Yeah.
But you're just asking me what's the safest choice.
Yeah.
That feels like one of those two guys feels like the air quotes safest choice. There is no safe choice.
Yeah, it's funny. If Bill Lazor were to get the job, it would be almost, I don't want to say almost entirely, I'll call it the final exam. I always call that the most highly weighted criteria for why you chose a guy or reason, would be the familiarity they've gotten with him the last 2 years in the building. Because there's no way you're hiring a special assistant or a special advisor to the offense off of any of the other 31 teams. Like, it's
right.
You know what I mean? Like, just based on titles, you're not doing that.
I think, like, the best, if you look at Lazor, he was with Marvin Lewis in his last 2 years, Marvin Lewis's final 2 years as an NFL coach. And they started off 26th in scoring offense. The next year they ended up 17th. And then the year after that was 2018, and that's Burrow's rookie year, right?
2020 was Joe Burrow's rookie year.
Joe Burrow's rookie year.
Yeah.
So I'll have to look and see how they did in 2018.
Yeah.
And they were 11th in scoring in 2014 with Ryan Tannehill. So like he's shown growth in one area. He had and the other been middling or below. I don't think they were abject. I think there were variables there where you could say, all right, it was bad circumstances or what have you. So I have no idea. I think a lot of it's just going to be based on what they've seen from him over the last 2 years. And I know like people around the league think very highly of Bill Lazor's football mind, his intelligence. It's a different deal running the show. So Nick and D'Amico having watched him and then him and Gerard work together, I don't want to see co-offensive coordinators.
No.
No. But that's the sense I get with like Gerard and Bill is in some ways, we haven't heard any reports that CJ, dislikes either of those guys.
Yeah.
We know he has a really good relationship with Gerard Johnson. But maybe if Gerard is the guy that they like the idea of, okay, Bill Lazor's an experienced offensive coordinator and he can be a resource for him. And that's where you get over some of Gerard's inexperience.
Yeah, it's for me, Seth, it's got to be a really bad hire for me to not be able to at least talk myself into it at some point with the Texans. That's just how I, like, mood-wise and mindset-wise, that's how I skew. Like, in the moment, I'll be like, all right, not the best hire, not who I wanted. By the time training camp rolls around, I'll look at it through glass half full, through rose-colored glasses, whatever the case may be. If the solution is promoting Gerard Johnson to OC, keeping Bill Lazor as the quarterback's coach, that won't be my first choice. But that's a solution that by the time training camp rolls around, especially once we've had a chance to hear CJ talk about it a little bit, Caserio, you and I will have talked with Nick Caserio about it a couple of times on the show about it. I feel like that's one of those solutions like, all right, I can talk myself into this. I totally get where people are like, I don't want anybody that had anything to do with last year's offense around anymore. I totally understand that. Yeah.
Let me tell you this. I'll tell you one thing, Sean.
What's that?
Jeff Driscoll had the best 5-game stretch of his career when Bill Lazor was his offensive coordinator. So, like, that's one of the variables that I'm talking. He had a season where he had to start Jeff Driscoll for 5 games.
Yeah.
And he threw for 1,000 yards,
so
6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions.
We've had to have one of those seasons too.
Right, I know. That's what I'm saying. We got more out of Jeff Driscoll than the Texans were able to.
We can empathize.
There have been Bill's that perfect example of, man, you got to be careful in who you select for your first opportunity or so.
Amen.
Because it just, his first go-around was with Miami when Joe Philbin was the head coach, and Philbin's an old offensive mind, and so it wasn't necessarily Bill Lazor's show. And then you go and you got your next stop, you got to use Jeff Driscoll for a third of the season.
It just,
yeah.
It sucks.
So you can see why, Nick Caley turned down the opportunity reportedly to take the Patriots offensive coordinator job last year, and he probably looked at it and thought, like, I'm just not so sure about this because I don't want to soil my name in a bad situation.